In this video, we will talk about the basic structures and functions of the brain. Neurologists can distinguish our brain into different portions and structures. In the image, you can see the hindbrain, the midbrain, and the forebrain. For the structures of the brain, for the scope of this course, we will focus on the cerebral cortex, the limbic system, the cerebellum, and also the brainstem. From the evolutionary perspective, the brainstem is the oldest part of the brain. It was found to be in reptiles 4 million years ago. So this is the most important part of the brain because it is involved in survival functions. So when we say a person is brain dead, we will say that it is damaged or malfunctioning in the brainstem. And it's in charge of basic life functions like breathing, digestion, and also your heart beating. Unlike the brainstem that is clearly defined, the limbic system is a structure that is quite wide and also undefined. So it doesn't have a clearly defined borders or areas and encompasses regions from the forebrain and the hindbrain. And it's important for regulation of our emotions and also other functions like sleep-wake cycle and also memory. The cerebellum is located at the back of the brain, and we also commonly call it small brain. It is primarily involved in fine motor skills and balance. So here I'm showing you a picture of a gymnast trying to balance on a beam. So people with a cerebellum stroke may have difficulty walking or maintaining balance. Finally, moving on to the cerebrum, which we also call the cerebral cortex. This is the most recently evolved area of the brain. And it's involved in higher level processes like cognitive functioning. So there are two cerebral hemispheres, the right and the left, and in the center it is connected by the corpus callosum. So each hemisphere is controlled for the other side of the body. So the left brain will control the right side of our body, and then the right side of the brain will control the left side of our body. This is an image showing the contralateral control of the brain. So if you are right-handed, you may be better at verbal activity like writing and language. And for those who are left-handed, you may be more creative and being good at arts. Each hemisphere of the cerebral cortex can be divided into different areas. So we mainly divide it into the occipital lobe, the parietal lobe, the temporal lobe, and then the frontal lobe. We will cover them one by one. The occipital lobe is located at the back of the cortex, and it is in charge for your vision, and damage causes blindness. So sometimes a person may have vision issues, and then they probably will go to the eye doctor, but afterwards they find out that it is the brain that has something going on. The parietal lobe is at the upper back of the cortex, and it is important in processing information about touch and taste. The temporal lobe is the underside of the cortex, and it is important in hearing and smell. Finally, the frontal lobe is the forward part of the cortex. It is responsible for behavioral motor plans and also producing voluntary movements like waving high. And it's also involved in complicated processes like planning and problem solving. So among adolescents, their brain remains underdeveloped, so the brain cells continue to grow up to puberty. So that's why compared to adults, they seem to be more likely to engage in risk-taking behaviors and also are more likely to have emotional outbursts. So in humans, the brain can actually be fully developed at the age of 25. With the advancement of technology, there are different ways to assess the brain. So the first one is the PET scan. So people may inject a radioactive substance into the blood, and then the brain is being scanned by different detectors. So areas that are activated during a task indicates greater blood flow, and then there will be more radiation traces on the image. Then another technique is the fMRI, but it's not invasive. So it can look at changes in the oxygen levels and blood flow. So these two techniques both have good spatial resolution. So it can tell you where brain activity occurs, but both have poor temporal resolution. So you don't know when things occur. So here is another technique called the EEG. So this image is me doing an experiment. So they put on different gels on your hair, and then you need to put on a cap. So EEG measures the electrical activity of the brain through the placement of different electrodes on your head. So it shows good temporal resolution, so you know when brain activity occurred. But compared to the PET and the fMRI, it has poor spatial resolution, so you cannot tell the accurate location of the brain activity. And another recent technique is called the DOI. So it looks at changes in light properties and seems to have good temporal and spatial resolution. So here wraps up the video on the brain. And now we have learned more about neurons and the brain. We will see how they may influence our behavior in the next video.